I am so excited to have this conversation today about one of my favorite topics, which is ferments, and especially kombucha with none other than the Kombucha Mama, Hannah Ruhamah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you for taking the time. And I would love to talk about the benefits of kombucha. But first, before we even get there, I'd love to just hear a little bit more of your story and how you got to be the Kombucha Mama.
Ooh, I love this question. So I call it kombucha kismet. I had no idea what kombucha was. I wasn't seeking it out. I had no specific health concern, which I know is a pathway many people take to find kombucha. I was visiting a friend from college who lived in San Francisco in the early 2000s, and it was a very groovy apartment tour we got. First of all, he had a filter on his shower, which I was like, oh, of course I'm filtering my drinking water. Why not filter the water that's falling onto my skin and get that chlorine off my body? And then we go into the kitchen and they're drinking Soleil, which is a pink Himalayan salt crystal water. And I'm like, oh my gosh, salt is so bad for you. And why is it pink? And what is going on here? Of course, now this is my salt of choice along with Celtic sea salt and no iodized salt anymore. And then we got to a room and there were these jars and they were covered with cloths and they go, that's the kombucha. Never heard of it. We didn't even try it. But when I returned to Los Angeles, again, this is 2003, lo and behold, there was loads of kombucha on the store shelves. And I was intrigued. So I grabbed a bottle, I cracked it open, and I went to take my first sip. And let me ask you, Thais, this is where I like to pause in the story and ask, what was your first sip of kombucha like? Do you even remember?
Well, I have two memories. So the first one was the basic kombucha. I actually really loved kombucha. I love that the fizzy, vinegary taste. I really enjoyed that. But the second time I had kombucha, I was in my car and I had gotten a kombucha that had the chia seeds in it. Was it chia? Yeah, it was chia seeds.
I know where the story's going.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, I don't know why I did this to like get the chia seeds off from the bottom to go to the top of the bottle. Do explosion. Yes. Um, and then actually third story, because my husband ended up doing the same thing at our house. He was right by the kitchen sink, which was great. But we had this like a window covering. We had a big window in our kitchen. And we have this window covering that's not canvas, but it's kind of a mesh material. So it's got like tiny little holes.
Uh-huh.
And that chia seed kombucha floated. And 5 years later, when we were selling the house and we're cleaning and we see that there's still like chia seeds on that thing. So,
Yes, this
yeah.
is a good warning story. Do not shake the kombucha. It is
Yes.
naturally effervescent and it will redecorate your outfit or car or kitchen, as the case may be. So handle with caution. But a lot of people, when they first try kombucha, because, right, you might think tea, which has a little bit of an alkaline flavor to it, this does not taste like tea. Just like wine doesn't actually taste like grape juice, right? You can
Right.
get the hints of the grapes, but it doesn't taste like that sweet grape juice that you give to your children. And so when I had my first sip, it was, oh, the heavens opened up, the angels were singing, every nerve ending in my body was electrified because I was sad. I was standard American diet. I was sure I graduated from college, but I didn't really know how to cook for myself. I was still eating ramen and various processed foods and using a microwave. And I didn't really have a clue about this stuff. So now here's the true confession. I was the girl sneaking the pickle juice out of the pickle jar. So clearly my body knew that I needed this kind of like tangy enzymes in my life. Of course, those were vinegar pickles, but I
But
love that flavor.
yes, yes, your
Yes.
body knew.
Yes, it did. And my thirst outgrew my budget, right? I started buying it all the time. I was really into it. And I don't know if you know much about human design, but I am an investigator heretic. So my role in this world is to bring weird things to the mainstream. Not that I knew that then, but that investigator part of my personality kicked in. I went to the library. I checked out every single book I could find on kombucha. I'm scouring the internet and I'm like, how come everybody's telling the same weird stories? There's no references.
Mm,
Why is there this strange misinformation about kombucha out there? And of course, because my thirst outgrew my budget, I had to get my own SCOBY. So SCOBY, for folks who don't know, is an acronym that stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast. And this is essentially our mother. This is what we put into the sweet tea, and that's what turns it into the kombucha. So I got my SCOBY.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Please.
Some people will call it the old lady that farts in the bottle. Just saying.
I haven't heard that one, and I really like it a lot. All of our ferments are farting, and they help us fart, which is good because it means we're moving things. But I fell in love. I literally had no idea that kombucha would then take over my life and become my passion and become this driving force into my entire career. So I started teaching kombucha camp in 2004. This was a workshop in my home in Los Angeles. I would introduce you to her, share the process, how to make it, send you home with your own SCOBY. And that grew into a blog in 07 where I just was so frustrated with the inaccurate information about kombucha that I started blogging about it. And then that turned into an online store in 2010. And it was in 2010 that we had sort of this alcohol crisis in the kombucha industry because, like all fermented foods and drinks, kombucha does create alcohol. Now, why does it create alcohol? It's really important that it does because the alcohol is a preservative. It's also there in amounts that are not intoxicating, and because it's in a matrix of yeast, which has B vitamins in a living form, with the organic acids that help support a healthy liver, it literally does the opposite of what an alcoholic beverage would do. Instead of intoxicating you, it's detoxing you. However, there is trace amounts of alcohol. Now, here in the United States, our alcohol laws were dictated by the crazy thing called prohibition when we decided, based on a Christian temperance movement and for some good sociological reasons at the time, to eliminate all alcohol consumption. And so our alcohol laws are more similar to more like Arabic countries than they are to our European counterparts. And so while in Canada, your alcohol level's at 1.1, in Mexico it's 2%, in Europe it's 1.2, here it's 0.5%. And kombucha can go above that 0.5% mark. And so it created a lot of crisis and kerfuffle in the commercial industry. But that then became the seed. That crisis became the seed for us to want to create Kombucha Brewers International, which is a trade association that supports the entire industry. And so we were formed in crisis, which is what you do. And I'm so grateful for the last 10 years. I just stepped away as the president, although I'm still on the board. We created a kombucha code of practice. We established authentic testing methods for the ethanol in kombucha. We've helped. Mostly what we do is a lot of education. Regulators want to tax kombucha like alcohol because they don't understand what it is. And so whether it's New York or Australia or Brazil or wherever it's been, even in 22, we had to go to South Carolina and help educate them about kombucha. So it's an ongoing, exciting process of just helping people understand, first of all, that it's safe. Second, that it's not intoxicating. And third, that it really has a great host of health benefits that can support you, me, your garden, your pets, and so forth.
And Hannah, I wonder, as far as children drinking kombucha, my 9-year-old drinks kombucha and has had kombucha since he was little. When he was young, I would mix it with a little bit of water just to dilute it, as I dilute most beverages anyway, especially because there is some sugar residues, of course. And I think it's also really important to know that certain brands, if people are trying to avoid sugar, for example, when you're getting your kombucha, there's tons of kombucha out there that are perfectly safe if you don't want to get exposed to a big, jolt of sugar. But to always look at the label, because some I think, are added after the kombucha is brewed. And
so let me clarify this.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what? So this is actually the challenging thing is the FDA doesn't understand fermentation. And so any sugar that's included in primary fermentation, which it is our sugar source for the microbes, for the bacteria and the yeast, then has to be placed in the added sugars category, even if you're not adding additional sugar after the fermentation process. And so that's been really challenging because people will look at the back of a kombucha label and go, oh, this one has sugar. Now let's just clarify what we're talking about when we say sugar here. We think of sugar, we think of table sugar, we think of sucrose, right? Which is a disaccharide. It's made up of fructose and glucose. Well, the reality is in fermentation, what happens is the yeast excrete an enzyme called invertase because the disaccharide is too complex a molecule for these microbes to consume. And so the yeast excretes this enzyme, it breaks that disaccharide into its monosaccharide components, fructose and glucose, and they're both really important. So the glucose is really important for that glucuronic acids. These are acids that are naturally made by our liver, just not in quantities great enough to help us get rid of the massive amounts of toxins we're exposed to in the environment and whatnot. And then the fructose, which also is just a nutritive substrate for the yeast and the bacteria and whatnot. Now we want some of that to remain behind, otherwise we're just drinking vinegar, and we all know how that goes. Knocked down easy, and probably with some honey or additional sugar to support there anyways.
Right.
And so when we're looking at the sugar grams on a kombucha label, the thing to keep in mind is this is pre-fermented. This is already broken down and has a lower glycemic impact on the body. In fact, a recent study from Georgetown last year, where we connected Georgetown with a commercial producer who was able to create both a placebo beverage as well as a kombucha beverage. It was a small pilot study, but it demonstrated that folks who have type 2 diabetes, when they drink kombucha on a regular basis, it lowers their fasting glucose rate. So again, I want people to understand that it's not, when it says sugar, it's not what you're thinking it is. And so even if there is a little bit of a higher sugar content, assuming it's a raw, not pasteurized, not from concentrate product, you're getting the full benefit of the kombucha in that commercial product.
Right. Well, thank you so much for clarifying that. And so coming back to the kids, then in that case, do you feel like, do you have any reservations, or would you say if they're really, really teeny to dilute, or do you feel like the benefits are there and no matter the age, it's okay?
Our motto here at Kombucha Camp is trust your gut, right? And this isn't trust your taste buds, because taste buds can be tricky, especially if we have things like candida overgrowth, which drive us to crave sugar, and then we feel bloated and horrible and have rashes and, obviously don't feel good as a result of consuming that sugar. So trust your gut. It's about closing those feedback loops, and it's about making the decision that's right for you. Human beings have been consuming fermented food since the dawn of time. Like, are yeast cultivating us, or are we cultivating the yeast, right? Like, we have this very close relationship to the point where, if you feel comfortable giving it to your children, then absolutely. If you want to dilute it, that's probably not a bad thing either. However, bitter and sour are the flavors of health and digestion, and human beings instinctively know, because we have millions of years, potentially, or at a minimum 6,000 years of DNA wisdom packed into our body. So whether you believe in reincarnation or you're trusting that your DNA is carrying information from your ancestors, we instinctively know what we're supposed to eat for our bodies. Now, what happens, of course, as we grow up is there's, propaganda and advertising and very moneyed interests that are trying to sway which direction you should go for eating, and that creates a lot of confusion. But when we trust our gut, and again, that's listening to those biofeedback loops, and I think kombucha is a great way to start to feel that biofeedback loop. So I recommend drinking first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, maybe 2 ounces, 4 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
Like, literally, every time I talk about it, I can feel like you feel your insides relax and open up. Like, there's just, and so you start to be able to make this connection. Oh, when I put this into my body, this is how it makes me feel. And the more we're able to close those feedback loops with everything we're consuming, not just the foods in our body, but the information we're seeing in the media or whatnot, everything we're consuming has an impact on our health, on our stress levels. And stress is the killer. So any way we can mitigate stress, that's good.
I love it so much that you said that. Part of my work and some of the work I've developed with my husband, who's a somatic psychotherapist, Nick Shawley, is called Diet as Our Daily Intake of Everything. And truly is. We can't look at what we consume just as in, food we put in our mouths, which is, it's one of our most intimate relationships with the world outside of us, right? We're taking everything from there and bring it in here and breaking it down and building new cells from it. Everything becomes us, but also the thoughts that we have, especially the repetitive ones, which turns out are, a big percentage of our daily thoughts, but the media we're consuming, and then the messages we're letting in. So like you were saying, the external influences can really change our perspective on what we want, especially more of the craving or desire or all those messagings of, you're worth it. And, and it's like they're selling crap. Um,
Or
so
be afraid about this thing happening in the world that you have no control over.
yes,
And
which
but
creates
which
unease, right?
well, and this is why I say stress is the killer. So stress can come from a bad diet. It can come from, your emotional state. And think of the word sane. Sane means healthy. And the more we've started to understand how the gut microbiome is your pharmacy, right? I always thought this was making the chemicals. No, it's, I truly believe the first brain is the gut, because the gut is what has to be in balance so that you are mentally balanced as well. And the more that we're deepening that understanding and that connection, I'm sure it's not simply hierarchical. I'm sure there's plenty of
Hmm.
crossover there, but getting your gut back in order really does help clear up the mental and creates more sanity. And look, I don't know what people are going to do in the world, but I have this innate belief that humans are good, that they crave community, and that when they are devoid, or when they can remove the stressors of the world, that they're going to make choices that are in the best alignment to create community and support those around us. We have this misapprehension from Darwinism that everything's in competition. In fact, the vast majority of the world of ecosystems, your own body, is cooperation. And
Yes.
the fact that we're only looking at competition for survival of the fittest, as opposed to, but how does everything else survive and thrive, through cooperation.
Yes, cooperation, community. It's why we call colonies. If people are taking a probiotic or drinking kombucha or eating their sauerkraut or kimchi or whatever other ferment that they're doing, it's colonies. Like we're actually installing healthy communities inside, because we need that not just outside, but inside, right? Um, Beautiful. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about Kombucha Day, which is coming up. So February 21st. And how did that come about?
Absolutely. So World Kombucha Day is a holiday invented by my husband and creative partner, Alex Ligori. We wrote the Big Book of Kombucha together, that came out in 2016 on International Women's Day, which felt really appropriate. We call it a mother culture. I'm Kombucha Mamma. So that all felt really great.
Right.
And at the time, we wanted to launch World Kombucha Day on 2/21. And the reason we chose February 21st is because the earliest information, the sort of mythological origins, we'll never even really know where humans came from. But we surmise that because kombucha is fermented with tea is from China. The Chinese are famous for their quest for longevity elixirs. One of the names for kombucha is tea of long life, tea of immortality. So we surmise that during 221 BC, the Qin Shi Huang asked his alchemists to create kombucha to help support a longer lifespan. And so that's where February 21st, 221, became our international date for celebrating kombucha. Now, it took until 2020 for us to actually launch it, but we're so excited that this is a day of global celebration. Of course, every year we see more and more kombucha brands around the world. We see more and more people having awareness of kombucha, and it's such a great culture. And really, because I love kombucha so much, think about it like this: it's a symbiosis of bacteria and yeast, which is what human bodies are, that has learned how to cooperate in harmony, that creates an environment that prevents pathogens and other things from being able to take root because of the strength of their cooperation. And so when we put that kombucha or any other fermentation, right, when we put that into our bodies, we're basically modeling to our
Mhm.
own system this idea of cooperation and community and harmony within ourselves. And so, I don't know, I guess that was my long way of saying that, I just feel like it's a wonderful way for us to keep raising the vibration on this planet through the frequency of what we're putting into our bodies.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. So tell us a little bit more about the kombucha book. That's so exciting, and I'm so glad that there's actually really helpful, clear information, communication about kombucha. And so it came out in 2016.
It,
How has it been?
it's been great. The book has sold over 400,000 copies. We're translated into 6 languages around the world, and we're working on a 10-year revision. There's a lot of not a lot of information, but there's information that's changed. For example, Jun Kombucha's raw honey cousin. There's a lot more hard kombucha that's out there in the world that we can speak to. The industry, of course, has made a lot of changes, and but the process of making kombucha is ancient, and it's something that's been passed down through the generations. And our book is 400 pages, so it's going to have everything from tips, techniques, recipes, how to, flavoring, troubleshooting. And we really insisted to make sure that the research, the health benefits were there supported with evidence. Now, a lot of the evidence is anecdotal or done on animals, and that's where it's exciting that just last year and the year before, we're starting to see some of these human trials being put out into the world. So I'm confident that we're going to validate the claims on kombucha, because just from a perspective of, right, scientific method is wonderful and it's great for testing a hypothesis in a controlled environment, but we as human beings don't live in controlled environments. We eat everything. We are exposed to all kinds of things. And when you hear the same stories again and again, it helped me reduce the amount of insulin I had to take. It helped lower my cholesterol. It helped get my blood pressure under control, my hormones rebalanced. When we hear these stories again and again, are there other cofactors? Absolutely, because we don't ever just consume one thing. And clearly the kombucha does have a positive effect on many of these types of health issues.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I loved what you were saying about feeling your gut relax. I definitely feel that too. And I actually just had my ginger kombucha upstairs that I meant to bring so that I could be drinking it as I talk about it. But this notion that, as we know, especially with the vagus nerve, and we were talking about the first brain, right? And the communication that's always happening in our bodies. I think our genes, our cells communicate with everything all the time. So all this life, the trillions of organisms that live within us and help us thrive, it's a collaborative relationship with all of our cells. And in the case of the vagus nerve, up to 90% of the fibers in this nerve are sending information from the gut to the brain. And so if the gut can relax, the brain can relax. If the gut is always on alert and the message is something is wrong because there's a lot of inflammatory processes happening, our brain will be inflamed too. It's going to be, receiving that alert message all the time. And that makes for unease, which eventually turns into dis-ease. So I'm wondering if in the research for in a book, do you see anything regarding vagus nerve specifically in kombucha, or is it not quite there yet?
I don't think we see vagus nerve, but we see a lot of support for the microbiome. So, and people want to assume, oh, it's got a ton of probiotics. Not necessarily. It has prebiotics, it has probiotics, it has postbiotics, it has symbiotics. It's all the biotics because it's alive, right? Also, it's the organic acids that it's creating. But what it does is it also helps to lower the pH in the gut. So many of our diets, right? People with acid reflux think, oh, there's too much acid. No, there's not enough. And so when you're putting a base product in there, like an antacid, you're neutralizing that and the symptom goes away, but you're perpetuating the problem because you still need to lower the pH in your gut. And so when you're able to digest your food more efficiently, when you extract more nutritional value from it, well, first of all, then you can consume less. So a lot of times having kombucha on an empty stomach or before a meal is really great, during a meal, after a meal. And that's why we can have it at any time, because it's going to support that gut and your ability to process those nutrients. As I said before, we see the glucuronic and gluconic acids, and they're basically the bouncers of the liver. And so, as you already know, Thais, when we consume foods that have a toxic load or we're exposed to toxins, our body does its best to excrete them. But if it can't, they then get stored in our fat cells. And so we sequester toxins in our body because we don't have a pathway to release them. And this is where, when we get sick, it isn't a single exposure or a single instance of consuming a bad meal or whatever that's causing the issue. It's this over accumulation. And so what kombucha does when we consume it regularly is it allows your body to gradually chelate, to let all those toxins go. And so you know how healing is. It's like an onion. So you peel one layer, something gets better, but then this pops up, and now that needs to be dealt with. And the body is so intelligent. It has so much wisdom that when we trust that flow, when we trust that all of this is moving us in the right direction, and we include our kombucha, we include our other ferments, we include all of our, healthy foods, that gradually over time, all of this is going to resolve itself.
Yeah, and I feel like, especially when it comes to detoxing, I like the gentleness of, the approach with ferments and kombucha. I mean, there are some people that might not do well with ferments.
Correct.
there's a histamine component, it is a case by case, but overall, most people can benefit from it. And this notion that you can gently coax the body into chelating and detoxing, because there's a lot of things about, a detox. And I actually run a group cleanse twice a year. It's very gentle. It's all food-based. We include kombucha. And it's one of the, I've seen such great results, especially for clients that were either drinking alcohol or sodas. When they just switch to kombucha, it's incredible that alone can do, right, to help them. But this notion of going really slow, because I feel like a gentle cleanse versus a harsh detox, people can actually get the effect where if they're detoxing too fast and they don't have the pathways to let go of things, they're actually going to feel worse and they might feel like they're sick, or there's a number of different ways with the Herx-Harmon reaction that they can feel worse than when they started. And then they just want to run from the thing. They're like, this is not helping me. But when you're doing gentle things and supporting the body daily, so like you said, like drinking a little kombucha daily, there's so many other sort of therapies and practices that people can do that slowly you start being able to filter the stuff out faster than it comes in, which is our ultimate goal. In our modern life, we're exposed to a lot of stuff. It's going to come in. The body has its equipment set up to process it. When that gets jammed up is when we get in a pickle. So Hannah, I'm wondering too, going back a little bit just to the sugar conversation, I'm just wondering like why, say, one bottle might have 8 to 12 grams of the sugar, for say 12 to 16 ounces, and some might be in like the 20s. Is that, do you have any experience with that and how you've worked with companies?
So this is why we created the Kombucha Code of Practice, but a code is only as good as those who are willing to follow it. And so what KBI is leaning into next is a seal program that will validate products to the code, because what's happening is people are afraid, oh, if they hear it's pasteurized, they won't want to consume it. Oh, if they hear it's from concentrate, they're not going to want to drink it, or they're not going to perceive it as valuable. And on a certain level, right, we all know pasteurized from concentrate and raw juice. They have a different price point. They have a different shelf life. They have a different flavor profile. And we probably buy all three at different times, depending on our needs, on our use occasion, where are we going with this product, what do we need it for, etc. And so, but there is this, because we're a young industry, there's a lot of fear around telling the truth. And in lieu of regulation, there's litigation. And so we've seen some litigation that has forced some brands to be more transparent on the label. But essentially, you can kind of tell by reading the ingredients if it's a product from concentrate, if it's a zero sugar or sugar free, and then there's the addition of stevia or monk fruit, because essentially what they've done is they've made like a kombucha vinegar. They might even pasteurize it, and then they're back sweetening with other flavors. Now my attitude is there's a kombucha for everybody. Instead of like playing these sort of purity wars or whatever, my kombucha is better than yours. We just need more people drinking kombucha, because any kombucha is going to be better than a soda. Any kombucha is going to be better than an energy drink, right? And so start with you don't want your kids to have alcohol at all in the kombucha, well then have that pasteurized kombucha, have that kombucha that's from concentrate, because then you can guarantee and control that outcome. Other people are going to want no, I want the home brew, I want the punch me in the face sour stuff, I want give me the real thing, and you're going to have people who want that too. And so there's a spectrum of folks. And this is, again, it's education, it's knowing the product, but like all the finer things in life, there's always a period of adjustment. And right, think about it like this. We used to drink Folgers or Nescafe, right? And that was the only type of coffee you had. Now what do we have? Single estate, shade grown, pooped out by a bird, who knows, right? Like all these iterations and sophistication. And same with chocolate, right? We just had Hershey's, and now we've got bean to bar, and we have no cane sugar added, and we have vegan chocolate, right? So kombucha is ripe for this level of sophistication and understanding. But the first things first, we just need more people drinking kombucha. And I think of kombucha not as an endpoint, like just drink kombucha and everything's solved. No, it's a portal. It's an entryway to fermentation, to the microbiome, to gut health, to really deepening that personal relationship with the trillions of organisms that are inside of you, as opposed to thinking of yourself as this single monolithic being.
Yes, and I think about bone broth as that too. It's like it's an
Mhm.
entryway, and it's something that Mother Teresa she used to bring bone broth to hospitals to open the door for the gut to heal. So it's like
Mm.
very much kombucha, I think, opens that same door. And the fact that just drinking tea, so a lot of the studies with centenarians that show that they drink some sort of tea every day. So kombucha can also check mark that little piece as well, right? So longevity, gut health, which are both super interconnected. And I'm wondering for people listening, if they're curious about making their kombucha at home, do you have one or two tips for people to kind of
Yes.
get started?
Do it. It's not hard. If you can brew a cup of tea, you can brew kombucha. I think the biggest barrier for folks is they're afraid they're going to mess it up, or what if some bad bacteria gets there and I can't see it? And here's the reality: kombucha is a food. How does food tell you it's not safe to consume? It grows mold, and you can see the mold. And sometimes we cut the mold off the cheese and we use the rest of the cheese. With kombucha, though, once we have mold, it's in everything. Even if the mother's hanging out at the bottom and it's just at the top, we need to toss it all. Start with a fresh batch, with a fresh SCOBY. And in fact, the SCOBY it's literally abundance in action, and it's a great model for if you give an organism what it needs to thrive, it will. And that applies to you too as a human being. If you give your body what it needs in order to thrive, or your mind, or whatever it is, you will thrive. And so brewing kombucha becomes this almost like this ritual where you can imbue your hopes, your dreams, your love into the kombucha. And then when it's ready, you get to flavor it any way you like. It's this creative blank canvas, or maybe you'll make the same flavor again and again, like I do, which is love potion, blueberry, lavender, rose. But maybe,
Oh,
hey, this
good.
is
Wait. That was my next question. Favorite flavors. So what do you call it? Love potion?
Love Potion 99.
Ah,
But yes, it is blueberry, lavender, rose. And the book has 260, call them flavor inspirations. Again, I'm not here to dictate or tell you what to do. I want to inspire you. I want to give you a framework. But once you know the rules of kombucha, you can start breaking them and playing with them. So some folks can't have caffeine, so maybe you make a hibiscus kombucha, right? But we always want to understand the underlying process and work with the original ingredients until we have a familiarity with it, and then we can go off and experiment in all these different ways.
as a matter of fact, the revived kombucha that's made with hibiscus and it's red, that would be the thing I would always bring, like if I was going somewhere, especially when I was cleansing. And so definitely not partaking on wine or anything. That would be my wine, and I would put it in a wine glass because I felt like I was just like everybody else. So I wasn't like the odd person. It's like, oh, you're not drinking. What's happening? And, 'cause there's some weird, sometimes pressures around that. But the kombucha was just my like safety drink. And it was awesome.
1000%. And in fact, let me just tell you another little thing that happens with kombucha that I personally have observed and many other people have shared with me. And that is, and I have a theory that then sprang up as a result of it. Who knows if it's true or not? But the more kombucha you drink, the less sugar you can tolerate and the less alcohol you crave. And it's because it contains these elements in forms that our body can instantly uptake and utilize. And I truly believe, again, all evidence of human existence also contains fermentation, and probably it was beer, not bread, they were making first. And we fermented plants, we fermented flowers. They all had trace amounts of alcohol. I truly believe that alcohol is medicinal in this type of scenario. So we're not talking about the pasteurized beers. We're not talking about distilled to really concentrate the alcohol and make it high octane. Though that's great as a carrier for tinctures and whatnot. But I'm talking about alcohol in a living state with organic acids, with B vitamins in a living form. This is human beings crave this. Part of why we crave the pops and the sodas is because of the bubbles. The bubbles were the sign, right? Yes, comes from this root word meaning to boil, because when you looked at the top of your ferment and you saw those bubbles, it looked like the same bubbles you saw in boiling water. And so
Mm,
we are attracted, we are hardwired to desire um, not carbonation, effervescence, right? So
because
carbonation
it's
is when we
alive.
exactly, and it's natural and it's soft and it's not like the carbonic acid they're putting into sodas or first carbonated into things. And I just feel like human beings actually need alcohol on a certain level. And when we receive it in these really trace amounts, along with all these other vitamins,
Um,
nutrients,
yeah.
etc.,
Mhm.
we get what we're seeking, and then we don't crave the higher amounts. Now, here's the other great thing. It's a wonderful cocktail mixer and hangover cure.
Ah, yes. Tell me
As,
a little bit more about hangover cure.
well, as someone who, look, if there are kombucha cocktails at a bar, it makes it really hard because after the second or third one, I'm like, ugh, I'm at my limit. But of course, as a younger person, I sometimes would overdo it. And I would like at 1 in the morning crawling over to the fridge, or 3 in the morning, downing a bunch of kombucha, going back to bed, wake up, no headache.
Nice. That's
Nothing, no dehydration, because again, what are in those hangover remover drinks? It's B vitamins. It's these organic acids that we're talking about. Kombucha already contains it. And this is why I think it's a great cocktail mixer, because you'll still get to enjoy the like high, the fun, the buzz of the alcohol, but you won't pay the price on the other end. And in fact, you'll probably be sober by the time the party's over, and it's safe to drive home.
yes. Best part. Safety. It helps to
Yeah.
stay alive. How about that?
It really does. It really does.
Um, I have a quick question about your background because I know we're talking all about kombucha, but like everyone, we're multi-layered people. So tell me a little bit about your background and especially the three cards behind you.
Yes, yes. So, well, my major in college was Mandarin Chinese and Spanish. I had started Spanish at a young age. My teacher encouraged me to continue. I studied Spanish and French in high school, and then I decided I want a challenge in college. And so that's when I studied Chinese. You could even take a business Chinese class at the time. It was the late 90s. So I have a passion for words, I have a passion for language, and I have a passion for tarot and for human design. I am a Scorpio as my sign, which means I'm naturally called to the occult. And since the age of 13, I've had my own tarot cards and own many, many decks. And I love reading
Wow.
cards and I love oracle cards. And then I discovered human design, I want to say just a couple, maybe 3 years ago, and it completely transformed. So, for those who don't know, human design is called the science of differentiation. And it involves, it's an encapsulation of the chakra system, of astrology, of the I Ching, which is the Chinese hexagrams, and what it taught me was how to understand how to manage my energy and how to know when things are in alignment for me so that I'm not putting my energy towards projects that then deplete me. And
Mhm.
I truly have a passion to take this information and education to other entrepreneurs because we are our business, right? So if we're doing well, then the business can do well. But if we're suffering, oftentimes the business will suffer too. And if we can
Mhm.
understand this differentiation, knowing how to find what projects are in alignment for us, how do I need to manage my energy? So, for example, I'm a projector. And what this means is I don't have my own energy centers. I'm an amazing guide. I have a penetrating aura. If you seek out my wisdom, you will find it hits true for you. And I so appreciate that. However, I have to be invited into that situation. And so when I give unsolicited advice and it comes off as criticism, I'm like, oh no, what am I doing? But it's only because I haven't set up the right framework for whomever needs to hear it or not hear it, as the case may be. Sometimes I just got to keep it to myself. Um,
Yes.
but it also means my husband, who's a generator, who has this energy source, and he's like, how come you can't work like I do? And then I'm feeling guilty and I feel lazy and, I'm this horrible person. And how come I can't
Mhm.
maintain at the same level that he is? To come to find out, well, I'm not supposed to.
Right.
And so, as much as he's like, calorie restriction and exercise, and I'm like, I think it's deep rest and nutrition for my weight loss. I think for me, the stress is from doing too much, not overworking out, right? And I think this is
Right.
the beauty of living in the here and now in this modern age is the access we have to these other ways of thinking about framing out life. And again, none of this is dictating who you are. It's more, I call it the laughter of recognition. Like when I go over someone's chart, they're like, oh, that's me, or oh, I do this, or, and it can point out our areas where we might get tripped up or where we might have challenges. And just imagine if everybody knew their design and could differentiate into the right places, how, as a global organism, we could put people in the right places and we could function just that much more smoothly.
Yes. Yes. It's like with schools, right? I think with children, and I was thinking about the types because it's the projector, generator, there's a generator manifester,
Yes.
which I think is me,
Mm-hmm.
and there's one more,
Reflector.
the
So they
reflector.
have no defined centers. They need an entire lunar cycle to make any decisions because they have to feel everything before they can decide.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's so funny because I see that very close to my heart here at home. And I love Ayurveda, which I've studied. I have the Vata Pitta Kapha, and I feel like when you put those along with the human design, it's like, oh my God, you can have a path, around how to behave, what to seek so that you don't drain your energy, how to eat, how to rest. And like, it's just really beautiful that so many of these modalities, I think, are getting more traction today, and how cool that you can do the charts. We'll have to talk about that.
I love how we can take these ancient systems and layer them in and have a modern understanding. I think with this Pluto and Aquarius, we're just going to see an explosion of technology and different ways of understanding. I mean, AI is probably going to crack the code on ancient languages, and who knows what else is going to come down the pike. And that's why being really strong and secure and knowing who we are and grounded in our own energy is what's really going to help propel us through these challenging times of change and upheaval. We're going to see a lot of change happening. And how do people get through times of change? They come together in community, whether we have to hunker down or create a network or whatever it is. But that's how we're going to get through this change successfully. But the reality is things are always changing.
Community and connection inside and out. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a joy talking to you and learning more about kombucha and all the little, nuances of it. And so how can people find your book and your website, the Kombucha Camp?
Yeah, so Kombucha Camp with a K because I'm cute and clever. You saw those Ks, right? That's the word nerd in me. And the book is The Big Book of Kombucha. It's probably at your local library, so you can go check it out first. And of course, it's online. It's at our store. It's on Amazon if you want a Kindle version. So it's everywhere. And yes, we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to reach out. If you have any questions, we're on all of the Instagrams and the YouTubes and the whatnots. Everything is Kombucha Camp, Camp with a K. And find us there because you want to participate in our giant giveaway for World Kombucha Day. We've got a whole day of amazing talks. I just recorded my interview with Sandor Katz, a luminary in the fermentation world.
Nice.
We'll have an interview with GT Dave, who's the guy who put kombucha manufacturing on the map in '95, and many, many other wonderful guests. So it's going to be a really fun day. And leading up to it, starting on February 14th, we'll start giving away some of the many different prizes we have available. So check us out. I'm so grateful, Thais, to invite me here and speak with your community, and I'm excited to keep growing together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll make sure to put all this information on all of the channels and YouTube and Instagram. And so Kombucha Camp with a K, if you can go to Instagram and connect with Hannah right now so you can get access to all the goodies that are coming starting February 14th. Thank you so much.